Yeah, I don't
Chibi
know.
Kaiju wants to, sorry, Blunty. Chibi Kaiju wants to know, doesn't 900 megahertz still have better penetration than 2.4, even with Magic LoRa stuff? You want to address that?
Yes, but packet rate. And like, I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons, but like, I think the main reason is because 2.4 is like very much good enough. And that's where most of the development is. That's what most people are happy using. It was made as a racing link, so 2.4 makes sense for a racing link, right? And then the other main thing is just to say, like, if most people are going that direction, why would you produce a radio that doesn't go that direction? Like, if
Right.
80% of the stuff that's out, and 80% of the people that are using it, or what it seems like, are using 2.4, it's a
Right.
little weird to put 900 in it
Yeah,
unless you're kind of out of touch with where the market's at.
Right. The big disadvantage of 900 megahertz, in my opinion, is number one, the significantly larger antennas. They're more likely to get chopped. They're harder to protect. They're harder to mount. This is a small inconvenience, and obviously lots of people use Crossfire and manage it. But the other disadvantage of 900 is, especially if you're in Europe, the frequency band is so small. You can't get but a few pilots in the air, and you start to get interference. So a lot of European pilots are very, very compelled by 2.4 gig. American pilots, maybe less so. But that's clearly where the ExpressLRS sort of culture is going. There's a question here from MK about concrete penetration. In general, you can assume that clear line of sight range translates to penetration. That those things are bound by the same physical principles. There are a few exceptions where a specific material will be specifically absorptive to a specific frequency. For example, water is specifically absorptive in the 2.4 gigahertz frequency range. So a 900 megahertz signal will proportionally penetrate more through water than 2.4 gig. You'll see more reduction there. That's a case where penetration does not equal range. But for the most part, penetration equals range. And before you say, but what about atmospheric moisture? No, it's negligible. It's completely negligible under any of the distances. Unless you're doing a satellite link, atmospheric moisture is negligible. So
I just want to, one thing in the chat, I just want to clear up real quick. Mouse FPV has mentioned about, you talked about them showing ads on your Clips channel, but you didn't monetize it. So what would somebody non-107 do and stuff? The FAA put out a bulletin that basically explains like none of that counts. Those ads don't count at all. That doesn't make your footage 107. You have to be flying for commercial purposes, and there's like a slideshow.
Yeah, it's nice that they actually made. We all assumed, but it's nice that they said.
Yes, they put out like a nice summary, and they're like, "Hey, this stuff doesn't count. Don't worry, you're not breaking the law." It's like you should be doing this for benefit of someone, and not just YouTube's ads.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. You can upload to YouTube safely, even though YouTube might monetize it. Yes. Archimedes and others are pointing out that trees and leaves do contain water. And that is a case where potentially you could see a difference in penetration between 900 megahertz and 2.4 gigahertz that was not proportional to free space loss. The takeaway, though, is that for most uses, 2.4 gig is enough. And as long as if your control link is 3 times what your video link is, then who cares? At which point, so the difference between you just choose 2.4 gig because it's convenient and that's where the culture is, and there may be other advantages. It's only if your control link starts to get down where it's your limiting factor that you then go, oh, maybe I should switch. So,
Rip FPV says, can you run ERS on Freedom TX? I got a Mambo. Yes, you can, but it's limited to 250 hertz, I believe.
Lexine Tax points out that there's lots of noise and competition for bandwidth on 2.4 gig. 900 is much less heavily saturated. Disagree there. I mean, I see why you're making that point. 2.4 gig has Wi-Fi on it, and that can be a lot of noise, but 2.4 gig is also a much wider band than 900, so there's a lot more room for the LoRa to sort of spread out and work its magic. The other thing is that 900 is less heavily saturated unless you are flying with 2 or 3 other Crossfire pilots, in which case it's just completely clobbered. And anybody who's been to a race and experienced micro failsafes on Crossfire will absolutely back that up. So if you fly by yourself and never fly with other people, 900, yeah, it's less saturated and it's not as much of an issue.
There's also some studies. If you Google just a little bit, you could find about LoRa and Wi-Fi, and they do a lot of studies because they use LoRaWAN for like wide area Wi-Fi's, and how they interfere and how they work with each other. And there's a lot of work that LoRa does to kind of actively avoid those Wi-Fi channels. So.
Yep, for sure. LoRa is designed to interoperate with Wi-Fi.